Okay, it's Walter Yeates here of Gaming Lariat with Bryan Herren of Freedom Games. He's head of the marketing at Freedom Games. And Bryan, I definitely appreciate you being here with me. And how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
It's no problem at all. And it was very because watching a couple of showcases this year, a lot of Freedom Games kept popping up, and the publisher just like stood out to me. And I just wanted to reach out and talk to someone at the company, and I guess that's a really a good place to start because when you're working with indie developers, and then as an indie publisher, what are some of like the unique challenges you face in that regard, or some of the things that are rewarding as well?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think when we're talking about like independent media in general, whether it's video games, movies, publishing books, the struggle is always going to be funding for a lot of people. Being able to can I do this as a full-time job? Do I have the money to get this done in the way that I need it to be? As well as will enough people know that it even exists to care about it, right? Discoverability. Those are obviously two of the biggest issues as a creator of an independent project that you're going to be trying to solve. And I think that's the two areas that we have worked the hardest to solve for projects that we think are really exciting and just need the extra leg up from people who've been in the industry or have some additional insights.
Yeah, that's actually kind of leads right into the next thing I wanted to get at. Like, so when you're working with these independent developers, how do you choose which companies you want to work with? What's some of the things that
Yeah.
stand out to you?
Yeah, so I mean, it is a give and take process. It's a little bit like dating or matchmaking in any other kind of way. Like a lot of developers hear from a lot of publishers, and a lot of publishers hear from a lot of developers, and so there is a inexplicable amount of kind of just like chemistry. Like, are we aligned in our goals? Do we see the same way about the industry? Are we aligned in what we want out of this partnership? And then from our side, in terms of beyond just like the chemistry and do we see eye to eye? We look for games that we think are going to be successful or that will benefit a lot from what we have to give. If we think the game has a really strong promise, but it's really big in scope and the developer has been developing it by himself and could really use some extra money to bring on some development help, or is an exceptional developer and the game's basically done but needs a lot of QA help, or the game is a diamond in the rough and no one's heard about it yet and we believe in it and it just needs a signal boost to really be successful. We look where kind of the things that we can bring to the table will be an outsized impact on the success of the game, right? We want to get not to be too markety about it, because I try not to be too much of a kind of like LinkedIn marketing person, but we look for a return on investment, right? We look for games that we can get involved, we can benefit the product in a really awesome way and get it to a point where it's going to be successful. Beyond that, we have like certain kind of genres that we really like, and it's more just like it's beyond just things that we like. It's more things that we think are just really successful. We have a lot of games that are in kind of that like wholesome or cozy sphere of titles. We believe pretty strongly that the audience for gaming is widening and diversifying. And we see more and more different types of gamers existing. So we see the desire for wholesome and cozy games, farming simulator type titles, games that are a lot less crunchy with the mechanics, are a lot less stressful in terms of their gameplay, being something that a lot of people desire. And we, having published a couple of those games and working to publish some other ones, feel like we have a unique lens into kind of, what makes those games successful, both in the final deliverable of the game and in its marketing.
Yeah, and that also leads right into what's something that stood out to me looking through Freedom Games and already some of the partners that you already have for developers like Stellar Knolls in Indonesia, Elsewhere Experiences in France, and Stellar Knolls, they're making Anuchard, and Elsewhere Experiences making Broken Pieces, for those who want to look those up. And is that something that Freedom Games is looking to foster diversity in gaming as far as genres and as far as new areas creating games? And because that does seem to be something that is expanding.
Absolutely. Like there's no reason for us to limit ourselves to North America or even European development. We welcome, projects wherever they're from, whoever they're from. If anything, we see diversity as a strength in these areas where, somebody from an area that's not typically represented well in games might have a unique take that really strikes hold with people. We have a lot of women-led studios or women co-led studios, which is amazing. We love this to support those. And we have an extremely, global presence across the board. I don't think there's a continent we haven't touched that's not Antarctica at this point, in terms of where our developers are from. So, yeah, that's really not like, when it comes to like the question, like as long as they are able to communicate with us, right? It's, if they don't speak any English at all, it's obviously difficult. But as long as, and I would say the vast majority of game developers do at least speak English as a second or third language, right? That's really the only barrier to, working with somebody globally. We are ourselves a global team at Freedom Games. A lot of our team is based in North America, but we have team members in Europe, in Southeast Asia, all over in South America. So we're a global team supporting global games.
Yeah, and actually, that was actually something that stood out looking into Freedom Games, because I also work from home full time. And is that something that helps Freedom Games in when you're interacting with companies from across the world, because you're already used to that kind of interaction in office space type of experience? Because a lot of people I know during COVID had a little bit of a struggle working from home, because it is something new. It's not just sitting around doing nothing at home. You're still working. And
right. Yeah. So I worked a traditional office job. My previous gig before this was working with a couple of different gaming companies. One of them being Curse, which if you played World of Warcraft at all, you probably are familiar with Curse for like the World of Warcraft add-ons. But they also were a media company that owned and operated the Gamepedia suite of Wikipedias. MMO champion for World of Warcraft, the Hearthstone website, deck building for Hearthstone. And also when I was there, I was running marketing for Dungeons and Dragons Beyond. So D&D Beyond, the way to play D&D online. That was a traditional office job. I was working, I would go to the office every day, say hey to all my friends. I had a lot of, coworkers that were at different offices. So I spent a lot of my day in video calls already, but making that transition was hard. But at Freedom, we've only known the post-pandemic situation. We all kind of came together post-pandemic. So we have been remote first from the start. And I think that helps us out a lot, because game development isn't something that I think is constrained to a typical 9-to-5 schedule. I'm not saying that like we expect everyone on the team to crunch and work 20 hours a day. That's not what I'm saying. It's more that like it allows people to kind of set their own work schedules, right? It allows people to kind of work when they're most productive, because not everyone is productive 9 to 5. I work with a lot of creatives that they say they do their best work at 2 a.m. I think I'm very thankful I'm not one of those people. But I think it works to where we can be very, very flexible in terms of how work gets done, as long as work gets done, right? Mm-hmm. So we're very much remote focused in that respect. I think it works well for the developers as well, because the overhead of a developer, having and running an office is probably not something that most developers can afford, nor would we, really think is super valuable for a games development, right? So we do the best we can there, and I think Freedom Games does a good job of creating a community within the developers that we do have. So all of our developers are on Slack together. We have like a company-wide Slack. So if a developer, is developing on Unity and has a problem, they don't just have to ask, a forum or their own team members. They have 30 other dev teams that are on our portfolio that they can hop into a channel and ask about. So it creates this community of, we're all, I am trying to coin the term free folk as people who are part of the Freedom Games ecosystem. But I think having that additional kind of community and resource is really helpful for the developers overall, because it does add a little bit of a social element, a little bit of a collaborative element to working from home that I know has been a struggle for a lot of people. It's been a struggle for me to get that.
And that's actually really interesting. Is that something that is kind of new to the gaming publishing world, is having all the developers kind of interact together?
I honestly wouldn't know, to be honest. So I've been in marketing. I've been in video game marketing for the last decade, doing everything from esports to Dungeons and Dragons to sales campaigns where I'm running a booth for Samsung at PAX. But this job is my first game publishing, like actual being on the I am making video games side of the equation. So I don't know what other publishers do. We've worked with some teams that have worked at other publishers, and they tell me that those publishers weren't as involved or creating those type of communities. But I don't want to be so brash as to think that we're doing it better than everybody else, because I'm sure there's publishers out there that are fostering a community and doing a great job. But I don't think it's super common. I think there's a lot of publishers out there who are much more like, we give you money and we walk away and we hope you make our money back. And we try to be much more full service in that we are providing, resources for you. We're providing a community for you. We're providing a platform for you, because we're invested in your game succeeding as much as you are invested in your game succeeding.
And that brings up, because another thing that did really stand out to me, like looking through Freedom Games, there's games like To the Rescue, that's a dog shelter simulator, Airborne Kingdom, Sky City Builder, and like Terracotta, it's like it gives the Qin Dynasty in China, action adventure puzzle type game, and like Broken Pieces, like I mentioned before, Tyrant's Blessing, a fantasy RPG, and like Return to Enen, which is a game type I've never even seen before. It's like you have all of these different types of games under the Freedom Games umbrella. Is that, like you mentioned before, that the diversity, is that something that helps all the developers, because you have so many different types of mindsets and creativity going on in one community?
Yeah. So I think the one thing that we probably do a little bit differently than a lot of publishers is we are not as involved in the game development process as some publishers are. One of the things that we sell the game developers on is, we don't come in and then by committee try to change your game, right? We take projects that have already, usually either have a demo or are already out on Steam, or have started in early access, or like are farther down the line in their development. And so they don't need that, additional like gameplay tweaking or help from us. We usually leave that to them. So as a result, there's no reason for us to kind of, pigeonhole ourselves into a genre. There's no reason for us to be like Paradox and say we do grand strategy, right? Because Paradox is working with, all of their internal development teams and making grand strategy games, right? If they decided to make a sports game, right, they wouldn't have the talent that would know how to make a sports game. Whereas us, we're not, as involved on the gameplay side. We do QA, and we do have internal like feedback loops where we try to get a lot of, feedback from community members and our internal teams to like make sure the games are going to be fun to play and are great games. But we don't come in and take over development unless there's a genuine reason to, or the dev wants us to, or they want our feedback, or they want to pivot. So because of that, there's really no reason to, pigeonhole ourselves into a genre. I think there's value in publishers that do pigeonhole themselves, because when I see a Paradox game, I know it's going to be a certain level of quality for the, grand strategy genre, right? But I think as we're building up who we are, people aren't making decisions on whether to buy a game because it's a Freedom Games game yet. Maybe we'll get there at some point in the future. I hope we will. But I think it's more about the game itself and making sure the game looks good and the game is exciting and the game kind of scratches an itch that people have. So we've taken the stance of, if we think the genre is going to be a successful one, we don't really care what it is, as long as we believe in the game and we believe it's going to be successful.
And on that note, could you speak about some of the upcoming releases? There's like Symphony of War, Monorail Stories, and Return to Enen, and Broken Pieces, Tyrant's Blessing, and there's just a lot of things coming out that are like standing out, and like I'd see trailers of them and like, wow, that's Freedom Games again.
I hope that's something that we kind of tend to do, is like people go, oh man, I am seeing them everywhere. What is going on? We do kind of like the idea of investing in a lot of titles and using our platform to giving them discoverability, because that is, I think, the number one problem with indie games right now. And I say problem, say barrier to success
Mhm.
for indie games, which is just discoverability. There's probably a Vampire Survivors out there, a game that's like made by one person, relatively lo-fi, but just like has that je ne sais quoi, that people just love, right? That nobody's played, right? There's a Vampire Survivors out there with 5 reviews on Steam that nobody has played, right? And so the issue is, how do we solve that discoverability issue? And I think that's why we care so much about bringing a lot of games onto our platform and using our platform effectively, because it allows us to do stuff like be at IGN next week and show off, a dozen of our titles. If we were, a smaller publisher with only 3 games, it would be harder to kind of like split that investment, right? Because, these conventions, these shows aren't free, right? They cost money to be involved. They cost money to produce, right? But if we're able to kind of like work together as a team and like spread this out over multiple different games, it becomes easier for us to get involved with these conventions and these projects. So that's why we kind of like the wider like strategy there. And then on top of that, the games that I'm excited about, Symphony of War, I'm very, very excited about. I love tactical RPGs in general. Internally in Freedom Games, we usually have like little standard bearers, so like employees of Freedom who just like love the genre of the game and are usually a little bit more involved in the development and marketing of the game than normally they would be. And Symphony of War is that for me because I love tactical RPGs. But what's great about Symphony of War is that I think it scratches a little bit of like an auto battler itch, where it's not really an auto battler in that you're still moving your units around. It's not just play and it happens, but you're building up squads and you're setting up your synergies and strategies of how your team of units is going to fight before the battle even happens, right? You're building like kind of a machine of, I need my warriors on the front lines and my mages in the middle line and my healers on the back line. And I'm changing that formation and squad up based on who my leader of the squad is and their traits and when they're going to attack and where I think they're going to attack. And it creates really kind of unique gameplay experiences that is different from a lot of tactical games. I love Fire Emblem. We have a game that's very similar to Fire Emblem that released last year called Dark Deity. But what's amazing about Symphony of War versus a more traditional like Fire Emblem style tactical RPG is it's not just like a bunch of teenagers 1v1ing each other with samurai swords in a field. It feels more like an actual war going on. You have, squad units that are deploying across a battlefield and fighting other squad units, right? And you can lose half your squad and still like make it through the battle. You can you have a squad of ambushing rogues that need to go in a certain route so they can ambush out of the woods to attack the cadre of mages that are weak to sneak attacks, right? It just makes it feel much more like an actual war than the more traditional tactical RPGs, which all feel like small skirmishes, right? In the Fire Emblem world, you're seeing that is your squad and you're watching the squad battle in the midst of a war. And in Symphony of War, you're quite literally doing the full battle with 10 to 20 squads fighting at once.
Yeah, I'm glad you went to Symphony of War because that is a game I am very much looking forward to. I started looking into that deeply when I saw the first trailer of it. And then you did mention this, the Summer of Gaming 2022 from IGN
Correct.
Showcase and Freedom Games is displaying on June 10th. Could you talk about some insight into that?
Yeah, so we're going to be showcasing a lot of the games that we have coming up, mostly focusing on games that we're going to be releasing this year. But we do have a world premiere announcement of a game that is not available anywhere yet. You can't see it on Steam. You can't see a trailer for it. We'll be announcing that at our showcase that we're really excited about. That will be, it's not happening this year. It'll be releasing much farther in the future, but it'll be the first time anyone's heard about it. There'll be some news about Symphony of War and when it will be releasing. We'll be talking about release date announcements for several of our games. We have a really awesome kind of top-down roguelike shooter called Neon Blight, kind of set in a cyberpunk world that I'm really excited about, that we'll be talking about the release date for. That one's unique because it's kind of the roguelike cycle is, you go back after you're running a gun shop. And so you're constantly trying to upgrade your gun shop as you go, which is really fun. We have Tyrant's Blessing, which is another tactical RPG but with all of its gameplay heavily influenced by Into the Breach, which I love. So you're still doing, it's got kind of a roguelike feel where you're doing different runs and you're recruiting members and doing that kind of tactical battling. But it's what I love about Tyrant's Blessing and what I loved about Into the Breach is what actions everyone's going to do. All the numbers are like 1s, 2s, and 3s, right? Makes everything feel extremely impactful and very like rapid fire, which I love. I love gameplay designs that cut zeros off of things. I like simplifying things down to their basics so that the other aspects around them can shine. So I love that a lot. I love simplicity in game design that can do that. So we'll be talking about the release date announcement for that. We'll be talking about the release date for Retreat to Enen, which is, you talked about a little bit, is a survival crafting game that talks about, instead of slashing and burning nature, you're trying to live in concert with it. And then we'll talk about several other games that are on our portfolio that we're excited about as well for the year. So we're going to be talking about like a dozen or so games during that showcase, with a couple of others thrown in that we're really excited to share.
So is that how long do you think your presentation is going
it'll
to be?
It'll be an hour long. So it's
right, nice.
Yeah. So, and we try to do it a little bit differently than some other showcases. We don't like to trot out in a suit. There won't be some guy that you've never heard of in a suit jacket and a graphic tee underneath it making terrible jokes. It's gameplay and developers talking about the games they love, and that's how we do it.
Oh, nice. And yes, and on those notes is like some of the future goals of Freedom Games, because there's like it feels like just a big giant umbrella of all types of indie games that are from around the world. Like, what are some of the goals that the company would like to reach, whether it's for working with certain developers or develop a certain type of genre of game or anything?
Yeah, I think what's really exciting is since we haven't even been around for 2 years as a company yet, and so when we have signed games, it's normally with developers that are either on their first project or third or fourth project, usually still relatively new, because most developers, if they release a successful project, or that they feel good, or they're been around for a while, they're kind of locked in with a publisher who they either have a multi-game deal with or an IP deal with or something else. So it's hard to break in there. I'm excited to see where we have developers that we've been working with for a while start to release their second, their third, their fourth games with us, because that's when I feel like they'll really hit their stride and really start coming into their own. And so I'm really excited to see that. I can't wait for that. And then I think other goals we have is just to get better on our side in terms of the services that we can provide our developers. Like I said, we try to be a full service publisher, and that we're not just, the investment that you need to get your game finished and out the door and to not starve while you're finishing your game. But instead, we can provide the QA you need, the PR you need, the marketing help you need, the social media help you need, the, making sure that you're in the right events so you're getting the promotion that you need, bug reporting, community management, literally anything you can think of that is traditional in gaming, like in what a game developer needs to do to support their game outside of actually making the game themselves is stuff we want to be able to provide for developers so that they can just make their game, right? It's not really fair to be expected to make, an amazing indie title and also be good at marketing and also be good at community management and also know how to QA and also know how to do a trailer, right? So we try to take those burdens off of our developers, and I want to keep getting better at those services that we're providing the developers so that we can just, keep, outperforming with the games that we publish.
And what do you think is the biggest challenge in that regard?
As I said before, it's discoverability, right? It's, making sure people even know the game exists. And I think we do a really good job of that. We prioritize these events that I talked about before because we have so many games on our roster. It's really, it makes it easier for us to do that instead of, spending a ton to promote one game. I think we try really hard in terms of like optimizing how the game looks on Steam. So we work really hard to make good trailers, to make good assets. I'm a big data person, like a huge data person. I was a baseball stats head growing up. And so I do a lot of work about, hey, what numbers matter? Steam actually does a pretty good job of giving us pre-release marketing data. in terms of like, how many impressions does your game page get? How many visits does your page get? How many wish lists do you have? And so it even plugs in with Google Analytics, so I can see like, bounce rates and session times and users and stuff like that. I have no user data from Steam, which is beyond some like very basic UTM stuff, because Steam takes privacy very seriously. So I usually just know, hey, yesterday I had 300 people come to this page. Of those 300 people, 20 of them wish listed your game. Of those 300 people, the average time that was spent on the page was 1 minute and 10 seconds, like that kind of data. Which is really, really good, because I actually don't have that on any other platform. I don't get that from Xbox. I don't get that from PlayStation. I don't get that from Switch. Epic is a little bit better, but not quite as good as Steam yet. They're working on it. I actually appreciate Epic as a platform, because I think that competition is healthy and needed in a space like this. But compare that to mobile, where if I had a mobile game, I would know that, a dude named Dennis in Ohio who likes hot dogs has just bought this like $10 collector's package in our game, and I now need to send him performance ads on Facebook to go buy more. It's very different in terms of like what data is valuable for PC first games. And so I have cared a lot about digging into that. And I think that's a unique value that we give our developers is, I can go to a developer and say, hey, I don't think your Steam art's working. Your people are clicking on your game less than our other games, right? I'm going to get my creative team in here. We're going to sit down with you. We're going to fix it. We're going to make you a new Steam feature banner, right? A new Steam capsule. Hey, I've noticed that, over the last month, for the amount of people that are coming onto your Steam page, less of them are, doing wish lists. Let's improve what's on your store page. Maybe we need a new trailer. Maybe we need more screenshots. Maybe we need to do additional things like that, just to make sure that when we get that moment, right? For a lot of indie games, you only get one moment, right? You get that launch burst of traffic that Steam gives you when you launch. You want to make sure that you take advantage of that and you seize on it, and everything is in the right place to be successful. I think that's the really important thing to do in terms of like overcoming the discoverability issue. So, for Steam, like you need 5,000 wish lists and 10 reviews before Steam even starts showing you to other people, really. There are some organic ways to find games on its own, but if you don't have that baseline, like it's really difficult for someone to even find your game. So we do everything in our power to, kind of get you to that point, right? So that there's the algorithmic discoverability things that Steam does are running and working for you, right? Instead of burying you.
How does that work before a game is released, since there's not going to be any reviews there?
Yeah. So after a certain, we don't know these exact numbers because Steam doesn't say these exact numbers, but if you have a certain number of wish lists, that puts you onto the popular upcoming queue, right? And that's important because that gets you a lot of impressions for people that are checking for new games on Steam. That's discoverability, right? After you release, after you get to 10 reviews, that's when Steam starts promoting you to other people that like similar games, that put you in the discovery queue. And if you sell enough copies during that time, you go into like the top sellers or the new and trending, more discoverability, right? So for unreleased games, it really is just about driving wish lists as best as you can, or driving traffic as best as you can that you hope converts into wish lists. So that, you hit these, tiers of discoverability that Steam provides.
Yeah, that sounds, that's very interesting. And definitely useful information for especially indie games
Absolutely.
that do need a lot of help in getting noticed. And I think, I guess my last question would be as a gamer yourself, like what would be like the perfect game for you that you have not played, like a mix of genres or just something that you would be interested. You said you like tactical RPGs. That's something I definitely am into as well. As what would be like the perfect game that you just haven't played yet that you'd be interested in seeing?
I'm going to give away my secrets here, Walter. I want something that I'm actually kind of working with our Coromon team that I want them to develop, but obviously they're actually working on, finishing the game with their initial original design. I want there to be a mashup of like monster taming and roguelikes, because the thing that I love about Pokemon is giving myself restrictions, like nuzlocking type things, where I have to use like certain types of Pokemon, or I have to, have, new artificial difficulties. And I think people like monster taming and squad building in general as just like a mechanic, even if it's not, monster taming, the idea of like, oh, I'm building my squad of the 5 units I use.
Mhm.
So it doesn't even have to necessarily be monsters. But I do like the idea of like a monster taming roguelike, where every time, that it's a 1 hour run, right? And you need these monsters and you go through the dungeon or whatever you do. And you're doing a run and you have all these unique kind of like gameplay modifiers where you might only want to catch dragon types because you have a buff to dragon types as like a relic you found, right? Or, you're in a water dungeon this time, so you're trying to find as many grass types as you can. And then the kind of like Nuzlocke effects, like, the permadeath effects, or the other kind of issues that come in with Nuzlocke's limited catches, that kind of thing. Those feel a little bit more less punishing because it's one run and it's done, right? One of the things I love about roguelikes, and I think that has been so great, is mechanics that I think are very fun, honestly, like permadeath. I think permadeath is actually a fun mechanic when done as a roguelike, right? Because it allows very unique game, like immersive, like emergent storytelling to happen that in a full player, 40 player game, like 480-hour game would just be punishing, right? I try to play Fire Emblem games with permadeath on, but then I lose a character and I'm like, why? Like, I don't want to just lose the character. Like, I just miss out on all of his conversations. I miss out on all of their, potential unique classes or their bonds, right? Like, there's no reason for me to actually like accept permadeath. It's just only a bad difficulty spike. Whereas roguelikes let, kind of that kind of stuff can happen. Like really bad things can happen to you, and it's okay because it's just that run, right? And overcoming those in those runs can even be more exciting. So that's what I like. I think I like the idea of like a game that melds monster taming and roguelikes very kind of closely. Would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And yeah, I think that's all the questions that I have. That does sound like that would be a fun game to play. And it would.
I have copyrighted this. I have not copyrighted, not copyright gameplay. You cannot copyright gameplay elements, otherwise Coromon would be in trouble. But I have unofficially nose goes this rule, this idea, so no one steal it.
Yeah, that will. Yeah, that we'll let you and Freedom Games publish a game like that. That sounds like that would be something that you guys would be great at. And is there? Before we sign up, was there anything that you would like want to say about anything upcoming for Freedom Games outside of the IGN showcase on the 10th?
I would say just make sure to tune into the IGN showcase on the 10th. It's going to be at 1 p.m. PST, right after the Tribeca Games Festival. And so we have a lot of really, really exciting announcements there. I think we have like 5 to 7 exclusive like announcements, whether it's a release date announcement for the game or a new world premiere. Or a new announcement of a game that we've worked with and are signed. So I say stay tuned there.
Okay, sounds good. And again, I appreciate speaking with you today and definitely hope to hear from you in the future.
Absolutely, Walter. Feel free to reach out to me anytime also if you have any questions or want to dive deeper into anything else indie games. I am always around and the Stride team is fantastic. So
sounds good.
Thanks so much.